Alrighty, so we're doing this coaching video at my house because we have one act all this week, so that has taken all of our time, but thank you for coming so we can get this done.
You're welcome.
So I'm going to start off by talking to you about the current reality in your classroom, just because when you did the Are You Interested form, you said that you wanted to use technology to make lessons more engaging for all students. So we decided that I would come into your classroom for a whole class period during like a grammar notes and kind of lesson where they were correcting their sentences. And with that, I used the engagement form from the Gym Night textbook that I've been talking to you about. And overall, you scored in the 4 and 5 range. And that's pretty typical of high school kids taking notes, especially over grammar. So actually, that's a really good job. You did have some moments where they were really engaged, and I think that came from when you were using like interesting sentences or just things that kind of appealed to them. So based on that, it kind of matches your interest in receiving coaching because you do want to find more ways to make your teaching more interactive, especially using technology when you're doing lessons. So I'll go ahead and ask you the first question. It says on a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being the worst lesson you've taught and 10 being the best, how would you rank that grammar lesson?
I would say maybe a 6. Like, I felt like the kids were paying attention for most of it, and they seemed to do well in terms of when we did the closing activity, understanding when they were supposed to use the commas and everything. But it's tough to make grammar super interesting. And so I could definitely tell there were some times where their eyes were sort of glazing over. So above average, but only just.
Okay, that sounds great. Okay, so then moving on to question number 2. It says, what pleased you about the lesson?
Well, I like that when they had their closer, they were, showing that they understood commas, because it's the struggle as far as the writing.
Even in my classroom, grammar and just getting them, like, this is something that we just have to do, and so more power to you.
And this is the way this works, and it's not always just because that's where you pause. So I was pleased about that. I was pleased that most of them were actually actively working on their stuff most of the time. But well, I don't know if this is your next question, so I'll hold on to that.
Okay. Number 3, what would have to change to move the lesson closer to a 10?
Okay, so that's what I was just about to start talking about.
See, you were psychic.
I think, especially with the technology that we have, because they all have the one-to-one devices, and they want to use them, they take them out, and then, if I tell them to put them away, it's like, boring again. And since we just had that conference during our planning day about like how to use Land School and how to incorporate all of those things, I just kept trying to think of ways that we could take the more boring parts of what we do and make that something that's more interesting. Because grammar it's not the most exciting. They're not setting the world on fire to be like, this is where you put a comma. But it is one of those things where what I try to tell them is you have to do that to be polite to your audience. Like, that's part of communicating well and communicating clearly, is being aware of how other people can read it. And if you don't put the punctuation in the right places, they can't read it, and it changes the meaning. So I just want to make it something that's a little bit more interactive, a little bit more interesting for them, because then it'll stick more and they'll remember it more. And having more of them doing that, because a lot of them, I think, were just sort of doing it because they're like, oh, this is what we do. We're going to do a worksheet on commas. But it wasn't something that they were super actually engaged with, and we're doing all that work with the Schlechte Center about trying to make things more active engagement as opposed to compliance.
Right.
So.
Okay. That kind of basically answers question number 4, which is what would your students be doing differently if the class was a 10? So I'll kind of go into question number 5, which says, tell me more about what that would look like, maybe how you would want them to be using the one-to-one devices, maybe in that sense.
I think I'd want them to be using it more to maybe access the information, like instead of me having it up on the board and them like copying it down, or me having a worksheet with all the stuff on there, that they access the information there. They use their technological tools to kind of practice with it as they're going through, and so that it's not just, here are 12 rules all in a block, and now we will practice with all of these 12 rules. Because I do think, somewhere in the middle there that gets lost. They remember the first couple, the, commas in a series and things like that, and then they remember the last couple, but everything in the middle is just sort of like,
Right, so they definitely, once it starts getting towards the last rules, it's like, don't remember where commas go in addresses, and they always try and put it between the state and the zip code, and it's wrong, and so yes, definitely. So the next question is how could we measure that change? How could we measure that students are more engaged using that technology?
I think, one of the things that the Schlechte Center suggested was that we do surveys and have the kids sort of rank their engagement. And that's something that happened with the instructional conversation development that we went to too, where they like rank like sad face, medium face, smiley face as far as, where are they, or put it on a scale of 1 to 5. But also I think observations, just being it, because I think you can kind of tell.
Right.
And especially with the land school, if they're on a different website, you can definitely tell.
Yeah, so definitely, that's funny that you say that, because one of the things in the Jim Knight textbook is that using student interview data and like student response, student surveys is something that we could use. So that's definitely awesome. Do you want that to be your goal for this coaching session? To use technology to foster more engagement in the classroom?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So question number 8, going back to that goal, is if you could hit that goal, what would it really matter to you?
Yeah. I mean,
I think we're both on the same page. It's like we want to use technology more in our classrooms so that we can have more engagement and more meaningful learning.
And have it be something that's effective, so that it's not just like, I'm using this because because we have to use the computer, because they told us to use the computer, but in a way that's actually going to help the kids and be something that they can build on. Because a lot of our kids, their technological information is very uneven. Like, they can't send an attachment on an email, but they can do anything on TikTok.
Which isn't quite the workforce technology use we're trying
to not a skill that they're going to necessarily need.
No. So question number 9 is what teaching strategy can you use to hit your goal?
I think, I know Suzanne was doing that
the Pear Deck, the technology conference?
Yeah, and I didn't get to go to that one because I went to the one about like further things with land school.
Right.
So that would be really cool.
Okay.
But also I think just more like little impact checks.
Okay.
Instead of just being like at the end of the whole class period thing. And that's something that I kind of struggle with in terms of finding time to do those and like where to put them in the lesson.
So kind of using that platform, because Pear Deck does have that thing where you can like incorporate little mini formative assessments after like a couple of slides, or you can even do like pre-assessment, like, hey, what do you know about this? And then check your concept or your perceptions of it, and then like kind of fix whatever they know and don't know. Okay, cool. And then number 10 would be, what are your next steps? It's kind of I guess
that's what we're doing.
Yeah, I guess like us doing this coaching thing is what we are doing. Okay, cool. I just want to read you something about making the goal.
Okay.
And making a goal means Through the Gem Night textbook, we call them peer goals, which are kind of similar to SMART goals, and I know we have a lot of work with that. But peer goals are something that is powerful, so that's something that will make a real difference in the student life, and it's worth doing. It's worth the time going into this. Something easy, where it's like the shortest path to the destination.
I like that that's in there. That's nice.
Yeah, teachers like easy. Emotionally compelling. It's reachable, so something where it's like not really difficult, because sometimes we like to set goals that are like, oh, we're going to completely revise this whole entire unit within a day, and then we have student focused, which I think you're on the right track with that, with student engagement through the use of technology. So kind of based on that in your head, and we kind of talked about this earlier, teacher identifying a student-focused goal. And I think before we kind of did it, so we might have done this backwards, not too sure. You said 85% of students on task during note-taking with interactive instructional technology. Does that sound like something that you're willing to do?
Yeah, and I think that's because there's always going to be one or two kids that are kind of like not feeling it that day. There's stuff going on that's not really about me.
Yeah, and Roblox is addictive. That's the current struggle. Okay. So yeah, I think the 85% is definitely something that is reachable, and you have the specific destination with the easy interactive instructional technology. I feel like that's something that's super easy, and it is student focused because it is having that student engagement and having students like want to learn because it's exciting, it's engaging, it's fun.
Right.
Awesome. Identified the teaching tool to hit the goal when you were talking during our question session, where you say that you want to use Pear Deck to do that, because Pear Deck is that interactive software. Well, it's not really a software. It's an interactive kind of Google Slides add-on. And do you use Google Classroom?
I used some aspects of Google Classroom. I have my classroom websites through Weebly, but I've used Google Classroom before.
Okay.
I just haven't like had the kids sign up for one or anything.
That's fine. So you can still use it through your Weebly website. You'll just create the Google Slides using the Pear Deck add-on, and then you can upload it there. Or with Pear Deck, you don't even have to have students have a Google Slide or a Google Classroom enrollment. They just go to join Pear Deck, and then they type in the code and they're in.
Oh, that's cool.
And you get to see all the data and that type of thing. So I think that would be something that really, really works. But other than that, I think we've covered everything. Are you excited?
Yes.
Awesome.